This is a More Than Just Podcast production.
Welcome to this podcast, Season 5, Episode 6. My name is Timothy. I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Jonathan Kool-Aid in Mississauga, Ontario.
Greetings from the Great White North.
We also have Jaime Lopez Jr. in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
Jaime, you remember last week when we talked about the term historic and how bad it was to be on the bad end of something historic? Does it hurt like a week later to have your team associated with the term historic?
It is strange. It could be seen as negative. It's like, 18 innings and a 1-0 loss. But truly, we didn't, even though the books will say that we lost, in a series sweep, that would be the Seattle Mariners losing in a series sweep to Houston Astros. Really, from a fan's perspective, we had a draw in Game 3 and then immediately played Game 4. And that's where we lost 1-0 in 18 innings, 2 full games worth of baseball that occurred. It was, I think it was like 1 o'clock.
18 innings?
Yeah,
really?
I started watching them around 1 p.m. Pacific time, and then it was like 7:30, almost 8 o'clock. Like, I was actually, had another screen up watching the Yankees and Guardians play, and I was like, oh my gosh, they might finish before we do, and they were like the later game. That doesn't make any sense. It's nuts. So
do they have that many pitchers that they can keep rotating them in and out?
It was getting low. I think if they had gone further, the Mariners would have run out of normal pitchers and would have had to get fielders who can pitch at some point. The Astros had decided to put starters in as the bullpen, so they could have gone a little longer. So yeah, to your point, Jonathan, that's kind of a weird sort of connection of fate, right? To be on both sides of history in back-to-back series is nuts.
Yeah. It was pointed out to me by one of our listeners. You can guess which one that I still owe you for the first series. So we'll have to figure out. We'll have to settle that one up at some point.
Yeah, it didn't have like a immediacy date on it, and it never does. We were trying to do like the real world thing that I remember. I think it was like the Seattle Seahawks versus the Carolina Panthers in the NFL, and I think the Seahawks were victorious that year, so they got something. The mayor of Seattle got something from Carolina. I don't remember what it was. I do remember the if we had lost part, Seattle would have sent some nice smoked salmon and stuff. And they don't send it like the next day. It was several weeks later, they get around to handling it and they kind of make a big show of it. And it's kind of a nice, fun time kind of thing for the local broadcasters on both cities.
Yeah, the other one that they do up here for some of the hockey playoffs is that you have to wear the other team's jersey for the day to your work. So you have to go in support of, so if it's a Leafs versus Canadiens or something like that, you have to wear the sweater of your hated rival around proudly for the day, which...
As you walk Poyo through the neighborhood.
That's right.
That's a rough one for that one.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out on how we're going to settle up on the bet here and, make it a part of the show, I think.
All right. Can we do a podcast now?
Oh, all right.
If we must. All right. Well, start off with some fact check. Last week I was trying to struggle to remember the name of the movie Orphan. I said Orphan during the show, and I was actually correct. That is the name of the movie about a couple that adopt a scary-looking 9-year-old, which was actually played by a 10-year-old actress. But the spoilers, if you haven't watched the movie yet, but it turns out that it's not. The character's actually an adult woman who just never grew big. And Paradoxus is a genus of moth from the family Unpronounceable, which is interesting. I don't know if you noticed last week's episode, I called it, what did I call it? 3 rings, 2 something or other, and a moth, right? Yep. So the moth is the Paradoxus. There's the Easter egg for you from last week's show. And we'll move on to some sad news in the headlines.
Yeah, so I think we kind of knew which way the wind was blowing on this stuff, but there's a story that has been percolating the last couple of days. Netflix sent out a notification to its users saying we're enabling this new function that is going to allow you to transfer profiles. And, that was a little suspicious. We were like, why would you need to transfer a profile? They're like, well, people move, things happen, people get divorced. You might want to take your profile with you. I'm like, all right. And then the other shoe dropped and they were like, yeah, we're going to start charging if you have extra users. So, yeah, it seems like the crackdown that they've been promising is in the offing. They say that they're going to start charging a monthly fee to accounts that share passwords in early 2023. It still is not clear how they're going to do this. They announced this during their quarterly earnings, and they did say that they're up subscribers, so I guess they've got their swagger back. But I don't know. What are you guys taking this seriously?
So does that mean that you have 4 people in your house? You're going to have to pay aren't you already paying for like a family sort of privilege?
That's the part I'm a little unsure of. So it doesn't seem like they're going to charge you for other profiles. They're going to charge you for other accounts, essentially. So
when you're traveling in the United States and you log into your home account, they're going to charge you for that?
I don't know. That's the part that's really murky. And we talked about that previously, that I don't know how they police it. Like if I chose to watch Netflix on my account at work, when I'm at work, I'm entitled because I pay for their service. Are they going to be like, no, you can't log in from that location because it's not your home? That seems pretty sketch. So I'm confused and mildly concerned.
Yeah, I don't see this going well because there are legitimate cases where you would be at a different IP address, for example. Like your work and your home would have a different IP address. That would be the only, and maybe geolocation, that would be the only way that they could sort of pinpoint where you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like where the members of your family are, right?
Yeah.
Because theoretically, your kids could be on the school bus or the city bus, going to class and catching up on their Netflix, right?
100%. And I could be taking it anywhere across the country and the world, as you both have too. So yeah, I don't know how they actually put the technology in place for this. That's the part. Maybe you guys have insight, but I don't understand how you put the technology in place other than some severe tracking software.
So, at the end of the day, you're subscribing to a service which they have control over. So let's think about this, right? Let's suppose that, you have your Jonathan account and you log in at your home address, your home IP address, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then another member of your family logs in at a different IP address, right? They could connect the profile, the Jonathan profile, with the home IP, and that other address, that other profile with another IP. And then they could say, well, this other IP never logs in from your home address, for example, or your home IP. So then they could sort of, between the two of them, make an educated guess, with proof that, in fact, you're logging in from 2, I'm doing air quotes, locations, right? And then they could determine whether or not there should in fact be 2 accounts being paid for.
So the reasoning behind this is obviously they feel like they're missing out on potential earnings and they want to increase their subscription base. Do you think this has that effect, or do you think this is a backlash moment? We talked about how Netflix is not the best service in the world right now.
In the early 2000s, there was this band that played metal music, and they went after a sharing site that eventually got shut down, right? Because they weren't prepared for, the type of lawsuit they ended up with, I guess. I forget why Netflix or not Napster closed down, but it's the same sort of thing. Like I could see this being something they could do today, right? But, here's another example, right? And this may be a better example, is that, they call it right of way, right? Where, at the back of my house, the way I park my car, I have to drive about 6 feet across my neighbor's back driveway, right? To get in, to park my car in my spot, right? So in theory, I have right of way over that person's driveway because I've been doing it for 20 years, right? You follow me?
Yeah.
So the fact that the service, notwithstanding, none of us have read the Netflix legal agreement when we all went, okay, whatever, when we first signed up. But it might have a clause in that says, irrespective of right of way, even though you've been doing this for 20 years, we reserve the right to change the rules. And I'm sure they have that clause in there, right? In that case, they could say, my theory that I just came up with in my head, with my considerable IT experience, that they could marry your profile to your IP and then determine that, these two, and there must be two entities here because they never log in from the same IP address, for example, or the same geolocation, right? So they could determine that you're sharing with someone other than yourself, right?
Yeah.
Which I can't imagine anybody doing that. But like they own, it's their box, it's their tool, it's their toy, right? It's their ball. They can take it home if they want, right? Although, I go back to that metal playing band and that file sharing service, and that didn't work out really well because, to this day, none of the stuff that Metallica was fighting against has been stopped, right?
No.
We still,
Do you want to repeat the anecdote that we used to share about Metallica's policy on downloading?
What, your personal policy?
Yes, my personal policy.
Yeah, Jonathan used to, anytime he went onto Napster to get a file, he would make sure that he downloaded a Metallica song first.
And immediately threw it out, just out of spite.
Just to burn the bits.
Yep.
Burn the bits. Yep.
Yeah.
I think, this is less of a technical kind of question. Certainly there are different things that might give them signals. I think it's more of a product management question of how much are you willing to lose goodwill, because there's already been bad publicity for a long time, and they haven't even had actual stories yet, right? Of like, here was this one person and they were using it honestly, but false positive got picked up by their system and the door slammed in their face, and they're probably, a minority of some sort. They're probably disadvantaged in some way. Like, there are just all sorts of reporters that have already written up the entire story, and they're just waiting for like the demographic details to fill in and an actual name. So if you have that in mind, I think you go with a very careful hand of some things that are pretty obvious, right? Like simultaneous streams that couldn't possibly be legitimate, right? You were already talking about some of those. So start with some easier stuff that is less problematic, and keep in mind the philosophy that I'm going to bring up a Princess Leia quote to Grand Moff Tarkin, right? The more you tighten your grip, Tarkin, the more star systems will slip through your fingers. And that's the sort of crux of this. Yes, they could hypothetically squeeze out the moochers, but how many of those moochers are actually going to translate into paying customers, given that you are explicitly calling them moochers, right?
Yeah.
It feels more negative than what they would gain out of it, even though I understand the business reason for trying to grow when you've had growth problems this quarter notwithstanding.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't know. I'm really curious to see how this plays out. Really curious to see how this plays out.
Yeah, well, we'll have to wait and see. I don't know what that'll do for Netflix's thing, but if people really want to watch Netflix, they're gonna pay for it, right?
Yep. But this goes back to our conversation that we've been having throughout this year. Disney Plus has eclipsed them. They're a better streaming service right now with more content and a lower price point by a significant margin. It's almost half as much. Netflix has been publicly cutting projects because they've spent like mad, and eventually the bill comes due. I wonder if this is, for some people, just the tipping point.
Yeah, you're right. When I think about the shows that I watch, I'm primarily watching on apps that I get through my cable subscription anyway. I watch Prime stuff. I watch Disney stuff. I probably go to Disney probably 3 times a week for different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially lately. And and then Apple TV is my other go-to service, right? So I very rarely go to Netflix unless there's something specific that they have that I want to watch, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and they do have some quality shows. Again, I know you were a big fan of Ozark. Stranger Things has been great. There's undoubtedly quality products on there. It's just...
And the one with Princess Bean, Disenchantment.
Oh, Disenchantment. Yeah, again, there's no shortage of good shows on there. The question is, right now, short of Stranger Things season 5, I just don't know if there's enough. I mean, we talked about it over the summer. I don't know if there's enough to even hold me there right now. We talked about, the sustainability model. We talked about their delivery model where it's basically like, hey, we've got this thing, you get it all at once and you can walk away. Well, that's the Jaime Lopez effect, right? You download the service, you get it for a month, you plow through all the stuff you want, you cancel the service. When something else drops you want, you re-pick up the service and you watch it again. Why am I spending $24 a month when there are months when you're not putting any content on I want? Whereas the Disney Pluses and the Paramount Pluses and other apps are out there that are giving me content consistently. Or at least with Prime, I'm still taking advantage of Prime delivery and everything else. What's Netflix done for me lately?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Remind me, I got to go turn off my Audible subscription. Well, because I went into, there was a book I wanted to, how many credits do I have right now? I have 1 credit. Crap. And that's going to be the way it's going to be with Netflix, with me probably, right? I mean, I don't see why I'm spending money on it right now. So, because I'm not watching anything there. I mean, there's a few things I want to go back and watch, but I'm not dying to killing myself to go watch them, right?
Yeah. And there's series that I would definitely get it the month that something comes out. The Stranger Things, The Sandman, there are quality shows, undoubtedly. But if you're going to drop them all at once and I don't have to pay for 3 straight months like I would for a Star Trek season or for, Game of Thrones or whatever it is on another service, what's the enticement to make me pay for 12 months worth now?
Well, that's exactly the point. That's exactly a good point, too. We hadn't talked about it. It's the binge factor, right? Because, I mean, Netflix doesn't do the Apple TV and the Prime and the Disney model where they give you a show a week. That way they've got you hook, line, and sinker, literally, right? Because if you want to watch the show and you're enjoying it, you have to come back every week to watch it, right? Whereas Netflix, they throw it all out there at once. I mean, I think that's probably the mistake in their model right there, right? They should probably change that and go to have some things like if they had Ozarks come out once a week, they totally could have had me for like 8 weeks or whatever it was, right? Mm-hmm. No question. It's that good a show, right? But the fact that I can sit down and polish off a show in like a day and a half or 2 days, there's no reason to maintain that. They need to change. That's what they should change, right? In my opinion.
Yeah, I think we talked about it for some of the Sandman. I think was the example that we talked about in a previous episode. Fantastic show. It was talked about for 4 or 5 days and then dropped off the face of the earth. And
exactly, yeah.
To me, it doesn't make sense, that model, for that reason. But beyond that, again, our man Jaime was the leading edge of this stuff. If you don't need a service for 9 months out of 12, don't pay for it.
Yeah, there's even a known saying, the Jaime Lopez calculus, right?
Absolutely.
It's out there.
Absolutely. Our man Jaime, he's the smartest man out there.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Let's move over to Jaime and his sneak peek there.
Yeah, speaking of content to watch, so coming on November 17th on HBO Max is the nearly 40 years later sequel to A Christmas Story, the holiday classic. So A Christmas Story Christmas. Got the repetition wrong. A Christmas Story Christmas is going to, continue on with a now adult Ralphie returning to his childhood home, and he's got his own kids, and he wants them to have an experience just like he did back in the 40s. This one apparently taking place in the 1970s, so giving a different perspective on how life has changed and everything. So it is. I looked it up. 1983 is when that movie came out, and
shot in
if you're
Toronto.
like me. Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Partially shot in Toronto.
Yeah, partially shot in Ohio, partially shot in Toronto, but you can recognize parts of Toronto. It looks like Toronto I grew up in.
It's one of those ones, and I don't know if they do anything like this over in Canada, but in the USA, it's like TBS or TNT USA, possibly all three, have the rights to this. So starting on Christmas Eve, the December 24th, they start playing it for like 24 hours. So it goes really far into Christmas Day. and it's just on repeat loop, because what else? I mean, there's not a lot of really good television content. And this is kind of a heartwarming thing where during that 24 hours, I end up watching the entire movie in this completely random order, right? It's like, there's been a little break in the discussion. Oh, let's watch 10, 15 minutes of this show that's on in the background to give a Christmassy feeling. Which scene is it? Oh, it's the one where Santa Claus, pushes him down the slide. What's this one? Oh, it's when the dogs
put your eye out.
The turkey or the duck or whatever it is. The turkey, actually.
The turkey, yeah, the dogs.
Yeah, and those are not like necessarily in the sequence. They're not even remotely close time-wise, I think. And I haven't sat down and watched the actual movie from beginning to end in sequence. It's more like almost like an anthology series within the movie. There is an overarching plot line, yes, but it's very episodic in the way it's structured. So I wonder if they will follow that kind of approach here, or if it'll be something you kind of have to pay a little bit more attention to get everything. It's going to be one of the hardest things. It's really hard to come up with a sequel to a movie some 4 decades later. Yeah. But hey, it streams real good on HBO Max is going to be the sort of main thing.
And it's an HBO Max exclusive?
I didn't see anything about theaters. It says hitting HBO Max in the teaser and everything. So I don't know that it's coming out. It's holidays for the Americans. That is leading into about a week or so prior to our Thanksgiving. So not unreasonable to have it there. Hit that holiday. Since it's streaming, it costs you nothing. Why not stream it again during Christmas Day, Christmas Eve? Sure, I can see why they released it where they released it, but doesn't appear to be in theaters. I want to see.
I'd go watch the original one in theaters for sure.
It's just a classic. It really is one of the handful. We watch as a family. We make a point in December of watching a few different things. We always watch Christmas Vacation. We always watch, Xavier and I always watch Die Hard, because it is a Christmas movie. I don't care what people say. And yeah, Christmas Story is definitely on that list of things we try and watch every single year because it stands the test of time. It's so funny. There's so many funny scenes. The number of times that even just random times during the year we'll say it's a major award. Like you just find yourself spitting out, you'll shoot your eye out. There's all these great lines. So yeah, I hope they can recapture some of that magic because it's a classic.
Yeah. Well, our one of our guest hosts, George Stamolopoulos, has a full-size leg lamp in his house.
that checks.
Yeah. Fragile. It must be Italian.
Exactly. It must be. And the furnace. If you own a house, you've had to fight with your furnace, right? So for sure.
I like the part where he talks about his dad swearing, where he's talking about how some people work in clay, some people work in paints. My dad worked in vulgarity.
Yes, he was an artiste that way for sure. Mm-hmm. Right. What other wastes of time you have for us, Jaime?
Well, it depends on how you feel here. So Tim is providing a very different perspective on the trailer for Creed 3, which will be in theaters in IMAX March 3rd of 2023. So this is
by James Cameron, Creed 3?
I don't know who is directing.
It was
Michael B. Jordan is directing it.
Oh, so not only the star, but also the director, huh?
Yeah.
Oh. Huh. This continues the series of the illegitimate son of Apollo Creed from the Rocky Balboa series. And the first one, it was about sort of coming to grips with that legacy and becoming a professional heavyweight boxer. And part 2 brought back Ivan Drago, so he fought Ivan Drago's son and dealing with that legacy of that relationship. This one apparently is closer to home in his own story, where it was like a childhood friend or something who went to prison. So that's the guy that he ends up having to, I guess, perhaps to box, but certainly to deal with as an antagonizing force in his life. These are movies that are actually pretty well done. I know it seems like, just boxing, what can be done, but Michael B. Jordan does a really good job with these. So,
and Ryan Coogler is the director of the first 2. He's also the person behind Black Panther and in the upcoming Black Panther Wakanda Forever and Fruitvale Station and other things. He's a terrific filmmaker. So I guess that's the question mark around number 3 is, will it lose some of the magic without Ryan Coogler?
Good question.
I mean, I can tell you, I still remember seeing Rocky in the theater in the 70s. Like, I mean, that whole franchise is pretty interesting. I mean, it kind of went off the rails there for 5 and 6, I think. Was there a Rocky 6? I can't remember.
I believe there is. Wasn't it called Rocky Balboa or something?
Rocky Return. Yeah, Rocky Balboa. Yeah, pretty much 6. Yeah, and that's with that other actor who played his son. But yeah, and yeah, these are like, this is like the third of the second, iteration. It's like the Rocky movie, the Rocky franchise is sort of the gift that keeps on giving, right? So
yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, I don't know if I've seen Creed 2 though. I think I saw Creed 1, but that Sylvester Stallone's in the first one, right?
Yes, and I believe he's in the second with facing off with Ivan Drago and his son. The basic premise is that the wife left him. That was Bridget Nielsen.
Oh yeah,
was the wife in Rocky 4, and the premise is that that she was so shamed by her husband's loss to the dirty American that she left him, Ivan Drago, and his son. So he raised his son in like this, like, I need to live vicariously through you, that you prove that you can bring back our family honor, kind of thing.
Oh, interesting.
So it's more than just the punches, Tim. The punches are very joyful. I did see Creed 2 in theaters, and they did a really good job of making you feel like, oh my gosh, this would be terrifying to face off against a monster like this punching you in the face.
Yeah, totally. I did try boxing, and I went to a private school for a couple of years, and they had boxing one year, and never ever again. Yeah, I got my ass handed to me, as it were. And in a matter of seconds, it was just like, sparring was one thing, but when you get in a ring with somebody and it's like one of you has to come out as a victor, I was not prepared for that dynamic. Yep. Anyway, and it hurt. So over to John for some
stuff. I have some stuff. Yeah, the next thing I've got is another weird one. So it came out this week that James Gunn, who is, I guess, finishing up Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So we know he has had this sort of up and down, back and forth kind of experience. So he did the 2 Guardians of the Galaxy movies, both very, very, very popular. Then some of his past tweets came to light, and there was a bit of a scandal. He was fired from doing Guardians 3. He signed to do the new Suicide Squad movie, The Suicide Squad, with Warner Brothers and DC. And then after some time had sort of cooled down, Disney rehired him so that he could come back and do Guardians 3, because basically it sounded like the cast was not going to do a Guardians 3 without him. And so I guess the question was, is sort of Guardians 3 his swan song with working with the MCU? And it might be, because he's apparently working on a secret movie set inside the DCU. What it is very unclear. I did see some hilarious memes where people were speculating. They're like, well, they've done Suicide Squad and The Suicide Squad, so the next one should be A Suicide Squad, or some other variation on, Suicide Squad as in its title. But I think it's a strange thing. I don't know how you guys feel, but I think The Suicide Squad is probably the best DCU movie I've seen since Wonder Woman. Yeah.
Possibly. Yeah.
I would say probably those two would be my high water marks for the last 5-6 years. He did a great job. And, he clearly has a sense of humor that he brings to his projects. He has, clearly an eye for action scenes and everything else. So the idea of him going back and working in the DCU is interesting, except that the DCU right now is a catastrophe. They are not putting out very many good things, as we just talked about. I can only name 2 movies that I really liked of the last 5 or 6 years. And the new movie that's coming out this weekend is Black Adam, and it's getting scorched in its reviews this week.
Not good.
Not good. Yeah. I read the New York Times review, I read the Variety review, and the Hollywood Reporter review, and they were all pretty scathing. So, and I don't know if you guys have seen the spoilers, and I won't spoil it here, but there's a post-credit scene that sort of tips to where Black Adam might go next that is tied into more DCU stuff. I'm just, I don't know what to make of them anymore. And as much as I love James Gunn and I'm excited that he might be making more movies, and I'm sure he'll do a good job, I'm just not feeling love for that universe. And I guess I should be fair. The Batman, the Robert Pattinson movie was good, but it's not even clear if that's set in this sort of same DC EU kind of thing. So I don't know. But what do you guys think of all this?
But I mean, the Batmans and the Supermans, those are all part of this group of DC movies, right? Like, and the Justice League and stuff like that. Yeah,
the Justice League and the Superman v Batman.
Oh, and that Aquaman thing.
And right? Aquaman, so, two Wonder Woman movies. Yeah, the Justice League movie. And then the Superman, the Man of Steel one as well. So all of those are all interconnected. And in theory, the Flash movie that is also in kind of a weird place. We've talked about that on previous episodes where, you know, the star of the show has gotten into some hot water, is also supposed to be tied into that. And theoretically, so was the Batgirl movie that got kiboshed. So it's kind of a mess. And I'm excited, but I'm also kind of off-put. Jaime, are you into this?
This being the DC cinematic universe in general, Black Adam, I think I lost where.
Yeah, I guess just where is this going? Like, where do you think that James Gunn is the guy who can revitalize this? Is there some project? Is there any character you can think of off the top of your head where you'd be like, well, if he worked on Dead Man, if he did New Gods, like what could they do? Like Guardians of the Galaxy, maybe Green Lantern reboot? Like what could he do that would be enough to motivate you to be like, I give that a shot?
I think for me, I'll give him the shot anyways, because I think he makes enjoyable movies, and that's independent of, does this enjoyable movie help spur this larger franchise, which they seem to struggle to get off the ground. So I think, enjoying something like The Suicide Squad and other bits, I probably will be excited and go for it, but I won't go in expecting, and then this is what really gets the DC cinematic universe, into the tier of the MCU. I just don't expect that to happen, because they've had all sorts of weird fits and starts on this. And because of the relationship with Warner Brothers and HBO, I'm like, well, stream's real good if nothing else, right? I just got to wait 45 days and it'll stream, and I'll see for myself. I think that's where I'm at. Like, I'm excited to see his movie. I'm not necessarily hitching my hopes to the wagon that is, and this is what makes it all worth it for DC. It just becomes more of an independent comic book issue or independent episode in a sense.
Yeah.
No desire to see Black Adam, but
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really jumping. I'm familiar with the character. I was kind of hopeful because it is sort of DC's first, they did the Suicide Squad, they did the Harley Quinn movie. So I guess they've done the anti-hero hero kind of thing, but never on the scale of like Superman strong, which is what Black Adam is. And to make him a person of color, I think is a good choice to highlight another like prominent, dominant person of color. And then obviously, Dwayne Johnson's extremely likable and extremely charming. And so it's got the ingredients, but I mean, some of the words that they were using to describe it in the reviews were words like soulless, joyless, exhausting. Those are not words you want associated with your movie,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's not ideal.
Yeah. Oh, Joker's in one of the movies in here too, right? In this universe.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I'm not as deeply invested in both worlds as you are, right? In terms of all the stories and characters and stuff. But I probably know more DC characters from growing up and reading comic books and stuff like that than I do Marvel, right? Other than say Spider-Man, right? I mean, I've learned X-Men and all that Thanos stuff, all my approach to that is strictly through the movies, not through any of the books, right? So, or cartoons or video games or whatever, right?
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see, I guess. Hopefully it doesn't get canceled before they put it in the theater.
Yeah. Well, you can't write down all your $90 million movies.
Well, maybe you can.
Yeah. All right. Last up, this one, I got no words to put to this one. R.I.P.D. Part 2. Do you guys remember? Did you watch R.I.P.D.?
This is the one with Jeff Bridges and
Canada's own
Deadpool guy.
Yes, Ryan Reynolds.
I've only ever seen it like, as Jaime sort of says, it'll be on like TBS or something like that, and I'll flip by and I'll watch like 10 minutes of it, and then I'll get bored and move on to something else, But I've never actually sat and watched it from beginning to end.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a variation of Men in Black, right?
Yep.
Is how that would be my elevator pitch for it. So
yeah, Men in Black with ghosts, but not aliens. That's pretty much what we're talking about.
It's ghosts, right? It's just R.I.P. Yeah, I get it. So I don't know. I don't know if I need a. I don't need a
sequel or a prequel in this case.
I'm not watching it.
Jaime, are you an R.I.P.D. fan?
It didn't have name recognition, and then when I saw who was in it, I was like, oh yeah, I do remember. Like Tim says, probably watching it on TBS or something where, oh, okay. I don't think I sat down and watched it either. I saw probably a good chunk of it, but I don't remember how it ends, so I don't believe I finished it.
Yeah. Well, it's got a resounding like in the 20s on Rotten Tomatoes. It's not a well-regarded movie. I think, like all things comic book, they kind of build these things hoping that maybe there'll be a whole lot of them. But in this case, no. It's been how many years? I think it says in here, just like 13 years? 2013. So, sorry, it's only 9 years since they made the original. So they're doing a sequel, and it's not starring Ryan Reynolds, because, seriously, it's not starring Jeff Bridges. R.I.P.D. 2, Rise of the Damned, a prequel following the character played by Jeff Bridges, Wild West lawman Roy Pulsifer, as he becomes part of the RIPD. This time he's played by Jeffrey Donovan, who is one of the stars of Burn Notice, and it basically explains how he died and sort of tells you his backstory. And it's coming out on the 15th of November, and you can watch trailer online, or you can watch the first 8 minutes if you go to Universal's website. So if you want to tip yourself up to the edge of it. It looks like it's coming to it's like a direct to the iTunes store or Google Play Store kind of picture, or you can buy the Blu-ray. So it isn't even getting a streaming release necessarily.
So home premiere, they call it.
Home premiere. I guess that's it. Although usually a home premiere, they don't put out the physical version on the same day, so that's something else, I guess. But
you mean you can buy a disc or on iTunes and.
Yep.
Oh, okay. So you can own it, in other words, right?
You can.
Well, how about that? I used to call that direct to video, and that was like for kid movies.
That's pretty much what we're talking about here is direct to video. Yep.
Yeah. Well, it must be that good. You want to get it into people's hands right away.
So I now know it to get my uncle for Christmas.
Your uncle? Oh, yes.
my uncle, who has had occasionally in the past some questionable taste in his movie watching.
Wasn't it based on the front cover of the box was pretty much what sold him?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Anyway, well, then at least you got one of your Christmas gifts off the list there. All right. So we'll move on to the main part of the show where we talk about something related to Star Trek and the Star Trek universe, as we're called podcast, right? And this week we're talking about Star Trek Lower Decks. Season 3, Episode 9, Trusted Sources. Dun, dun, dun. And we'll collect some elevator pitches from the gang. What do you got there, John? Nothing?
Yeah, so my elevator pitch was, as the Cerrito visits some TNG haunts, a misunderstanding drives a wedge between Freeman and Mariner. How about you, Jaime?
Mine was pretty close. I went with the the USS Cerritos is on a mission for second contact with Picard's mission leftovers, but that's complicated by the introduction of an FNN reporter. So yeah, pretty close. Slightly different order.
Yeah, I I think it's funny though, because this has always been one of those conversations that not just Trek nerds, but sci-fi nerds have had for years and years and years. Is they do these Mission of the Week storylines, but they never go back, and they paid that off in a really big way by doing Wrath of Khan, right? That was like the biggest payback on, hey, remember that episode? Here's a bigger.
But this is SETI Alpha 6.
Yeah, that's right. So it's true, but then there's so many of those storylines where you're like, but then what happened? So the idea of they call it Project Swing By, as soon as they said the phrase Project Swing By, I started laughing hysterically. Like it's so on the nose for nerds. It's just so perfect to go back and circle back and not just go back to an old TNG story, but kind of mock it as they go. And there's so many great moments. The scene with the mural on the planet just had me in stitches.
Yeah. So I mean, the backstory is that Picard, in his infinite wisdom, finds that one planet is two planets neighboring each other. And I have not seen the episode, but I just got this from the show, that the one planet was serving the other planet with drugs, and everybody was addicted to this thing, and Picard basically broke the connection, and therefore freeing the drug addicts from being abused by their neighboring planet, and then left.
Yep.
Right. And then 20 years later they go back, and the mural that John's talking about is, they were all like, looking like drug addicts and that kind of stuff, and then for years after Picard left, it's like mayhem because they're all in withdrawals. And so the mural are all like, killing it, eyes bugging out and pulling their arms out of their sockets and stuff. And then they discover health and fitness and like Apple Watch apps and stuff like that. And they start, now they're all into, working out and things, right? And they're good. They don't need the Federation, right? So, but yeah, it's just sort of like you pull the plug on these guys, and then, it's one thing to cut an addict off. It's another thing to help them through the withdrawal symptoms that come afterwards, right? Yeah.
But it's the line where he says, it was pretty rough for the first 10 or 15 years, but after that we were fine.
They toughed it out. It's like they got over the withdrawal symptoms and made it through the tough part. Yeah.
I love that they show it at one point where the mural is there, and the mural shows the Enterprise basically buggering off into space and all of them reaching their hands out like, don't go. And then the middle of the mural is just chaos and blood and terror, and the other side is fine. Like, oh, just so funny.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, I had to look it up. I recognized the premise when they mentioned it, but as soon as I took a look at the I think it was Memory Alpha had the synopsis of the episode, which was season 1 episode 22. It's called Symbiosis for TNG. As soon as I saw it, I recognized some of the actors, and I remembered the episode. As soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, yeah, of course I remember that episode. And it came, screaming back, because that's another one of those weird ones, too, where, like, the Enterprise gets in the middle of something, and they're like, there's no easy answer. Well, we'll just declare Prime Directive and leave. Like, it's such a funny episode where Picard is basically like, well, we can't really solve this problem, and these people are dumb because they're drug addicts, and these people are dumb because they're drug dealers. Peace out. And they just take off. And yeah, they make a point of saying it's been 17 years since they were last visited. And yeah, it's the one place was like, yeah, we had 15 years of chaos. Then they go to the other planet and it's pretty much abandoned. Although that was my big question, was like, did the Breen kill all the Breccians?
Yeah, that's a real good question. They don't make it clear. I thought it was going to go in like a Tasha Yar backstory kind of route, but it was more of like a Terminator kind of, or alien invasion kind of route.
Honestly, I was getting Aliens, the James Cameron, the aliens, where they like come down to the planet. They're like, where is everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was good. But then there was a couple of interesting twists there. So the subplot to this one was that there's a reporter that goes on the mission with them to show what a good idea Project Swing By is, and of course, it goes south where this reporter ends up sort of basically doing an expose on how the crazy adventures that the Cerritos gets into, which of course are all the episodes we've seen. And instantly everyone thinks that Mariner's the one that did it, and Captain Freeman gets so freaked out that she ends up booting her off the ship and sending her to the infamous Starbase 80, which is what they were threatening in previous episodes. And of course, that's the division that sort of splits them. She gets kicked off the ship, and then by the time Freeman figures out, oh, actually, it wasn't Mariner that was the one that threw them under the bus. It was everybody telling their crazy anecdotes that was actually the culprit in this. By the time they figure it out and go to get Mariner, she's quit Starfleet and has taken off. And when they say she's quit Starfleet, I looked over at the sofa to my son and I said, I will bet you anything that it's with that archaeologist we saw in episode 5.
Really? Wow.
And of course, they cut to the scene and she's with the archaeologist from episode 5. And I looked at him and he looked at me and he goes, I know, I've got verifiable on that one that I actually did call that one. But yeah, just the fact that you could tell in that episode 5, that Mariner was like, maybe there is another way to do this. And yeah, I didn't know they were going to pay it off so soon. But as soon as they started setting this up, I was like, yeah, that's where that's going.
Yeah, that was my big question coming out of the episode of, what will Mariner be like now that she is completely unshackled, little as she was, by Starfleet? Like, she did all sorts of pushing the edge type stuff, knowing that there was an actual rigid command that could hypothetically punish her in some way. Now she just becomes one of those random, annoying people, as we saw from the Booth story of like, they just go off and play, alien games and ingest themselves with the various, oozes and crystals and weird stuff. Like there's no rules now. What is she gonna do? Like, this is like the Shaft more modern version with Samuel L. Jackson, where he gets booted off the force or temporarily no longer a detective. I forget why, because he's a loose cannon kind of thing, and he goes up to one of the criminal guys. He's like, man, what do I have to listen to? It's like, I'm not afraid of you. He's like, you're not a cop anymore. He's like, do you think that makes me more dangerous or less dangerous? It's like, pick one. It's like, now I don't even have to pay attention. They did all that crazy stuff while I was on the force. You think I care more or less now about following the rules? So that's my big question. What is Mariner like when she doesn't have Starfleet holding her down?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, this is a season that started with her being like, well, we're going to have to steal a starship. So, yeah, you're right. It could get really funny. Do you think that they resolve this in the final episode next week, or do you think that this carries over into season 4 next year?
I was a little disappointed that this wasn't the season finale, because I kind of looked at it and thought this would be a great sort of cliffhanger spot because to think at the end of doesn't Boimler go off to at the end of season 1 goes off to join Riker, and then we have to resolve that to get him back with the gang, right?
Yep.
I went and looked at as soon as the episode was over, and I jumped over to IMDb, I thought, well, if this was episode 10, that would have been a perfect place. I mean, they could have written, it didn't seem to have sort of a cliffhanger-y kind of ending, which they may do. They may do that there may be just some, irreconcilable differences between Mariner and her mother now that this has happened, that, they may end up the season with her deciding that she doesn't want to come back, right? And the gang all haven't, because we can't have the lower decks is the 4 of them, right?
Yeah.
And since it's an animated series, it's not like Tasha Yar where Denise Crosby can leave the show kind of thing, right? And they just replace her with Cass or something like that, right? But I mean, or Dr. Jablonski, or whatever the one. Pulaski, yeah. You know what I mean? Like in the case of human actors, they obviously have to resolve these things. You have to get a new guy to play Dumbledore or whatever, right? But in an animated series, these are like, it's just like, Scooby and Velma and,
Yeah, they just find sound-alikes and keep it going.
Yeah, well, but you draw the same characters and you just keep them going, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, those are the characters of the lower decks. Even though they've tried to introduce other people, like the Orion girlfriend and the other dude that was the one that's always the other ensign that's always, he's on a different group.
Oh, Jet.
He was being
Jet, yeah.
Jet, yeah. He was being interviewed, and the Trill girl too, the Trill lieutenant or whatever. They have introduced other characters, but they're not our people. They're not our four. What are we? The Delta shift or whatever they're called. They're not the Alpha.
Yeah,
shift.
I think they're Delta.
Delta, yeah. So the Delta shift, right? It has to be these four people to be legit, right? So if they want to go into season 4 with a conundrum for us as the audience, it's like let Mariner not come back, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe Tendi goes and joins her or something like that. Who knows?
Who knows indeed. Maybe she'll get embroiled with the Section 31 storyline from last week. I don't know.
True, yeah.
A couple of good... so the Pew 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 was obviously the fight between the Breen and the new automated starship, which I thought for sure was going to trigger some sort of conversation about being replaced by machines and no longer needing crew all that stuff, which is, very topical. Did you guys have anything different for the Pew Pew Pew?
No, mine was the USS Alito, the Texas-class fully automated ship.
I figured you'd be right all over the Texas class, Jaime.
I was not familiar. I had to look up. I was like, I'm sure that must be a city, just like, you've got the California class has its own sort of theme, and it is a smaller town just west of Fort Worth, Texas. So the DFW airport, Dallas-Fort Worth, it is in that vague area if you're trying to put it on a map. So,
nice, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to assume if we see those again, they're going to be other Texas towns, just like the California classes all have, California-themed towns and stuff.
Yep.
I found it interesting that the Breen ships they almost looked like cardboard cutouts to me. Like it's almost like they took the Breen ship from, I don't remember the Breen from TNG, but it's almost like they took their ship and just cut it out and just had 3 of them, because I don't really recall them turning very much, They looked very much like cardboard cutouts during the battle scenes, right? I mean, I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But it just looked odd to me.
Well, it's interesting too, because they're using that sort of mix of animation styles too, where you get, sort of traditional cartoony kind of look when you're inside the ship, and a little more sort of 3D kind of polished a little bit more on the outside stuff. So it's a tricky balancing act, I think.
Yeah, and is this the first time we've seen, other than crashing a ship into the planet? I can't imagine that ever happening, but is this the first time we've seen where a weapon of some type takes out 4, like the complete deck? Like, because remember they got hit by the thing, and the ensign at the con said, damage to all decks, right?
Yeah, no, there was another battle. I'm trying to remember which one. One of them where one of the torpedoes goes right through the saucer section. One of the Star Trek movies. I'm trying to remember which one.
Yeah. I
don't know if it's Star Trek 6 during the battle at the end with Chang, or if it's the one where it's Riker and Troy in Insurrection. I feel like one of them gets like a puncture right through or maybe both. We'll have to fact check that one for next week.
Because have we had many people lost on the lower deck episodes so far?
I mean, Shax died and came back.
Yeah, how did that work?
Well, they specifically didn't tell us, right?
Right. Okay.
It was
yeah.
an incredibly harrowing mission, but he doesn't want to talk about it.
Oh, I get it. Okay. Yeah. He's like the guy from Carlson from Marvel Universe, right?
Oh, Coulson.
Yeah, Agent Coulson.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That would sort of be my pew-pew, was that sort of battle between the Breen and these guys.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I thought the robot ship was going to be like, the drone ship or whatever was going to be like, some super duper, that came out of left field, really,
Yeah.
But yeah.
For the Easter eggs, at one point they talk about going and visiting strange alien planets, and they're down on the planet where the Onarians, and they're like, check out their system of government, see if it's run by kids or someone pretending to be the devil. So
right.
Again,
yeah,
perfect. Thank you very much for that one.
Well, they also mentioned at some point that let's go back to the other planet. Maybe they've been they've fallen prey to Landru again, right?
Yeah.
That was another Easter egg.
Yeah. Again, those those little Easter eggs for the longtime Trek fans, for the people who have seen it all and been there for it all, they're great. They really are. Yeah, and sure. Yeah, I mean the quote. I feel like one of you or I, or maybe both of us, should have got a writing credit on this one. The quote from Mariner, where she's talking about how uptight Freeman is when she finds out this reporter is going to be on board, and she says, "Hey, Carol gonna Carol, right?" I feel like that's something you and I have said probably a few times in our lives, Tim.
Maybe, yeah.
Carol gonna Carol, right? Yeah. I might have that tattooed somewhere on me.
And the Rutherford quote, who put that one down?
Yeah, I put that one down too. That's the part we didn't talk about, was the pie eating contest. Yeah, where they're talking about going and having this pie eating contest, and they're really disappointed that it's going to get canceled. And when Rutherford finds out, he says, "But I've been expanding my GI tract so I could eat more pie."
Yeah.
Dislocating your jaw and stuff. I think that was tendies. Like everybody had prepared. Everybody prepared for this event. It was a big deal for the lower deckers. Yeah.
Yeah. No, another funny episode. And again, nice one. We've gotten some DS9 this year. We've got this. We've got some Voyagers. Yeah, it's nice that they're sort of mixing it up. Very little Enterprise, but that's okay.
Yeah, it's coming.
Yeah, I'm sure. Been a long road.
My quote came out of so this sort of background of this episode is about Captain Freeman's ambition, right? We know that that's her character flaw, that she doesn't want to be just the captain of a lowly California class. She's got ambitions to do more things, and that's why they did this whole, like, it was her idea to institute the second contact, like this, or let's come back again sort of thing, that we don't just nope out of there and never go back to see what happened after first contact. And when they're like on which planet is it? The good planet? Is it the Onara planet? You're like, oh, you don't need us. We have medical supplies, engineering know-how, unlimited snacks. I'm like, really? Like that was in your desperation. Unlimited snacks is what you came up with there as to why they might need your presence to make it worth doing this whole trip, and therefore validating your good ideas or promotion kind of thing.
Shall we move on to Andor?
Cool. Yep. So we're back into the I guess the 4. How many? 12, right? So this is the third triad of stories, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. This is the sort of start of the third arc, as they've been saying. They're doing these little sort of 3-episode series within a series.
Yeah. Well, my elevator pitch is pretty simple. You can't go home.
Yeah. It's good. Yeah.
How about you guys?
Mine was, in the wake of the heist on Aldhani, all our key players are on edge, and many of them are looking for Cassian Andor.
I didn't have a good one. I'm looking at mine, and it's just a ramble of the various plot lines of Mon Mothma makes political moves, the Empire spooks are getting info on robberies, Rebellion considers killing Cass tries to get Mama Cass off-world, and Karn gets a job at a cubicle farm, which is a little bit too literal of like, yes, those are the basic plot lines, but not really. I didn't do a good job in elevator pitch on this one.
Yeah, but the cubicle farm was interesting too, because I mean, the guy did sort of sell him on taking the job in terms of being able to basically get back into the fight in a sense, but do it with data science, right? And I think it ends with him sort of like raising his eyebrow, right, over what were the stories coming in, right?
Yep.
Because he's connecting the dots.
Because he's checking out fuel quality. Is that what it was? I can't remember what department he was in.
Yeah, I think they mentioned the fuel purity. Definitely, I don't know whose pew this is. I had written down a fight without a shot, and somebody else wrote down Dedra versus Blevin. That was my same thing.
Yeah, that was my pew.
That was like the best fight I've ever seen without raised voices. It was so vicious and yet so civil. It was so well acted. Yeah,
I love the part where the boss guy, I can't remember his name, but he says, "Walk with me for a minute, Deirdre," right after he announces that she's won, and he just says to her, "Watch your back."
Yeah, that's Partagaz is the name of the major who runs that group.
Well played, and watch your back are pretty interesting bits of praise and warning for her.
Yeah. She's definitely made some enemies with that move, but interesting. Like she's definitely getting it in a way that the rest of them aren't. That this is not as random as it seems.
Well, and he praises her for being creative in her thinking. The rest of them are like he's starts off the scene chastising these other guys for being incompetent, right? And and they're so incompetent. They say, "What would you suggest?" Like, kind of rather than admitting they don't know what the hell they're doing, asking for help or his help, right? So, and she's the only one. And then of course Blevin starts in on she broke the rules, and she dug into all of our data, and she figured all this stuff out, and she went big instead of looking for small things, right? I mean, she spread a wide net to get the evidence that she needed, right? And she in fact found that there was connections, right? As she suspected, right in the very first or second episode that we saw her, right?
Yep. It's interesting too, because we've had the last 3 episodes really building around the heist, and really kind of focused on this rebel group, and really focused on even the sort of the Mon Mothma and the Luthen of it all. The sort of, this is sort of the big first thing that they're going to do to really step the game up. Although we know that there's been other rebel activity they mentioned in the series, but I didn't even really think about it from the Luthen perspective. And I really like that scene in the episode between Luthen and Mon Mothma, where she goes back to his store and he's gesturing and smiling for the chauffeur who's clearly a spy for ISB, and yet they're having again another civil yet uncivil conversation where she's like, look what you've done. You've put us right there on center stage. You've taken this big swing. And he's like, yeah, but it paid off. This is what we needed to do. And she's like, yeah, but the Empire's gonna come down hard on us. And he goes, yeah, we need that too. We need them to overreact and start revoking laws and start enacting new laws and revoking rights.
Pissing people off. Yeah, exactly.
Because that's what's going to inspire people to our cause. And it's really interesting the way that they sort of have spun this sort of this how to foment a rebellion kind of, from all the angles, from the political angle, from the, sociological angle, from the monetary angle. It's really well written.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. The other I guess the other pew pew I liked was when Mon Mothma was talking to her friend from her home planet or whatever. And he's like, you wouldn't like, I can't tell you about my politics if it would be too uncomfortable for your taste. And then she very carefully and very delicately says, lays out the fact that she's actually working on something, tells him that it would probably be too difficult for your taste, in fact. Right?
It's really interesting to me that we are now probably 8 or 10 minutes into this conversation about Andor, and we haven't talked about Cassian Andor. Like, this show's good. It's really good, but it's not even just about Cass, right? Like, he's great. Diego Luna's great, and we'll talk about some of his scenes too, but there's a lot going on, and some really great performances beyond just it's not just a showpiece for Diego Luna. It's not just an ego trip. Some actors would be like, well, I have to be on screen for 80% of the show. I'm the star. This show's not doing that. It's really kind of painting a bigger picture, and Cass fits into it, and he's the glue that binds it together. But yeah, it's really interesting that he's not on screen a lot in this episode.
Yeah, for sure.
We see a lot of the daily lives of other people. That's where last time I'd say, well, I'm kind of weirdly rooting for the Imperial security folks, even though I know they're the Empire is bad, but some of these folks are kind of just largely doing their job. We did see examples of others, and there's some examples today of stuff that's like, well, it's more than just doing your job. You're being a real bad person about this power you have. But we also saw stuff like the administrator or clerk, whatever the justice sort of thing that was going on, right? So they made all of the rebellion type laws like extraordinarily harsh.
Yeah.
So instead of 6 months or something, you get 6 years that Cassian gets on planet Miami.
For being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yeah. That
trooper was just like, hey, like you look like you were involved.
Look scruffy.
It's like, because I'm brown or what? Where are we going with this? And it's like, well, you're sweating. Is like, bro, it's hot here. Like, what do you mean I'm sweating? I'm just trying to go to the store. It's right there. Let me go.
Yeah.
And then he finds out that his de facto mother also is a rebel, right? Because he's when he goes home to visit her, he's like, "Come on, let's go. I've got some money. Let's just get out of here." And she's like, "I'm kind of too old for this, but I've got a fight here that I want to see through." Right.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting. She decides not to, or she tells she's not going to go with him. Right.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. That he needs to go and that she can't go. Right. Yep. She's staying, and so they need to part. That is how he ended up on Planet Miami, as I call it, and this is my Easter egg. The subtitles say that those were shore troopers.
Yep.
Just like you have the snow troopers and other ones. Shore troopers. That one's new to me.
They actually have only appeared in one other place, and it's not a coincidence. They appeared in Rogue One on Scarif.
All right.
Did they? Okay. Yeah. See, I missed that they had beach-colored, which would make sense for Scarif, beach-colored armor.
And I think that's the idea is, because we've seen a snow trooper, we've seen the scout troopers in the forest. I guess it stands to make sense that there would be ones who are adapted for hot weather or for beach weather. But yeah, the only other place that we've seen the shore troopers so far is on Scarif. And honestly, the only reason I remember them is because they actually made a Star Wars Black Series figure of the shore trooper. That's the only reason that name immediately clicked for me, was that they had done that for Rogue One.
I see. Good.
The Easter eggs that I have pulled out, so at one point they mention in the ISB security meeting, they're talking about Ord Mantell, which a couple of different references. One, for the really old school fans like yours truly, there was a little side adventure that you could get on record or cassette. Yes, record or cassette. Back in the 80s, that was the Rebel Mission to Ord Mantell. And that was a little side adventure where Han Solo and Princess Leia go on this little mission to try and steal some dough to help finance the rebels on Hoth. It's not canon, but for me, I listened to that tape till it wore out, so it resonates for me. It's always been that name has always been clicked for me. They also, for you guys, having just watched The Bad Batch, Ord Mantell is where they go on the mission to retrieve Moochie, the little baby Rancor.
Mm-hmm.
So
there we go.
That's another one. And the other one that I didn't notice, but I had seen somebody mention in the in an online article. I'm going to give credit where credit is due here. Oh, Dork Side of the Force. It's on an article on Dork Side of the Force, mentioned that the colonel who comes into the room, when they're all sitting around, Partagas is there, and the colonel comes in and sort of says a few words at the beginning. That's meant to be the former admiral, now Colonel Yularen. Yularen has been in a ton of properties over the years related to Star Wars. So in live action, we've seen him here, and we also saw him. He'd been retroactively added into a scene in the Death Star when all the admirals are sitting around the table and Tarkin is holding court in A New Hope. He's one of the people there. They retroactively said, yes, Yularen would have been one of those admirals, and he died with the Death Star. But for Clone Wars and Rebels fans, in Clone Wars, he was the commander of the Republic Star Destroyer, or whatever they were calling it, Republic starship that Anakin used to fly around on. He was the leader of that ship. And we see him later in Rebels. He comes back and he is working with ISB. He's working with the security group. So that connects with this. So we knew that he was sort of at this place at this time, but this is the first time we sort of see him walk out and give a little speech in live action. So a nice little reference, and thanks to the Dork Side of the Force for finding that one out. My big question was, we get our first look at one of those KX droids, those big, giant, hulking black droids like we saw in Rogue One. The question is that one that misunderstood the orders and grabbed Cass and held him up by his throat, hang on to him? Was that K2SO, or was that just one of those random droids at this point?
Well, it wasn't. It was a random droid because it didn't have Tudyk's voice, right?
No, but he hadn't programmed, I don't know if he reprogrammed it to sound like that too, right? So it could be that body, but he's just, reprogrammed the stuff inside him too. But yeah, it's such a weird thing because obviously they all look this. It's like saying that trooper was clearly the trooper from, and you can't tell. They all look the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think they were definitely going for that vibe though of you're setting up the fact that he's going to end up with one of those one day.
Yeah. Best quote?
Yeah.
They said, what? I love the line from Luthen when he's talking with Mon Mothma and he says, "The Empire's been choking us so slowly we've begun not to notice." It's such, and again, he's a fine actor. It's just such an ominous line, especially when you think about like force choking. It's such a beautifully crafted sentence.
Yeah, mine came out of that same sequence with Mon Mothma and Luthen saying, people will suffer. That's the plan. Right?
Yeah.
Which you had mentioned already for the way you foment the rebellion.
Yeah, and then following that up was that conversation she's having with Take Holma, who's the banker from her home planet of Chandrilla, and she says, the Mon Mothma people think they know, it's a lie. It just again, she's a terrific actor too, and the delivery on that one, it's kind of sends a chill up your spine. You're like, yeah, she's really cutting to the heart of this.
Yeah, and also like the two of them repeating the same line, I don't think it would be not to your taste or something like that. I
don't think my politics would be to your taste. Yeah, no, that's a great one. Yeah, it's great. We really are in a lucky stretch of great television. This show is fantastic. It's quickly becoming one of my favorite pieces of Star Wars.
It's pretty good, and I kind of wonder, given that they're showing us other slice of life pieces, and I know they'll all eventually sort of tie in, but you could imagine things that would have been unimaginable before, like, hey, what are the economic impacts of the destruction of the Death Star? I bet you somebody had like their whole family business wiped out because they were like, supplying maintenance to the Death Star, and now they're like,
you sound like Randall now.
Now I sound like a madman of like, what were the negative impacts on this family who they had this family business. It was in their business for generations to help out. They went through the Republic, they went through the Empire, and that's like ultimately why some of them end up fighting for the cause of the First Order. Just to tie it into that, right? They got radicalized because it said, by golly, our family was doing well, and then these stupid rebellion, now New Republic, like they had all these great platitudes, but guess what? Me and my family are starving here on planet Backwater.
Yeah,
there's your pitch for a series. Now we could root for it closer to the bad guys, but not really. These were just civilians cleaning the toilets on the Death Star.
The part that we didn't mention, we only mentioned, I guess, a tiny bit, is Cyril, the aforementioned officer who lost his job because Cass was good at his job. That scene at the very beginning of the episode with his mom was the height of comedy for this series. She is so funny, where she's like, is that what you're going to wear? Like, just, it's so good. Mm-hmm. She's just got this great...
What does my caller say about me?
Yeah. She's got this great voice, and she's so tiny, and yet you could just see him like seething and cracking, and just, she's so much fun. He's just sitting there like, I'm trying to eat my delicious little Pebble cereal in some nice blue milk. Could you please not rip me a new one first thing in the morning? I'm about to go for a job interview.
Yeah, those sick mom burns are difficult, challenging to deal with because they know where to push the buttons.
Oh, she's so good, so good.
It's so interesting the scenery, like from when Deirdre's walking through at the place where she's at, and it's all sort of new and plastic mm-hmm. and very New Hope-ish, right? Yeah. Whereas, when I don't know, the girl in the red who was walking to meet the rebel leader, Val, and she's walking through all those shopping malls, and I'm thinking like those are actual real places, and I'm kind of wondering, like, I wonder how they scouted those sites and where those actual scenes are taken from, and then when she's walking through a matte painting and when she's walking through an actual physical place, like I thought it was really a really interesting sort of juxtaposition in terms of like how they're shooting these things. And then of course, the planet that Cassian is on visiting his mother character, that's all sets, right? Sound stages, right? Kind of interesting the way they mix it all, but it all seems to cohesively fit to the story that's being told, right?
Yeah, I was thinking that during that one scene where we get that mysterious character where they never really mention her by name, but she basically says, she meets with Vel and says, you've got a loose end, you're going to need to go and kill Cass, right? Which probably is worth a mention, but you're right. That scene, one, it was really well, interesting shot, right? With the mirror on the ceiling where we see her walking and then it pivots upwards and we see her reflection walking the other way. And yeah, there's some really cool stuff there. And you're right, the design of this series has been quite exceptional.
Yeah, I'm just looking for the quote from Clark about that Randall has about the Death Star for Jaime. You've seen Clerks, haven't you, Jaime?
Yeah, is it the one related to like radicalized farm boy does terrorist attack on the Death Star? Does that come from that?
It's basically like, he's defending Randall's theory is that the first Death Star was justified and they were justified in destroying it, but the second one,
it's because it's a rush job, right? They were trying to get a rush job, so they had to hire outside contractors.
Yeah, so here's the actual thing.
Mm-hmm.
So a construction job of that magnitude would require a hell of a lot of more manpower than the Imperial Army had to offer. I bet there were independent contractors working on the thing, plumbers, aluminum siders, roofers, not just Imperials. Is that what you're getting at? He says, exactly. In order to get it built quickly and quietly, they'd hire anybody who could do the job. And do you think the average stormtrooper knows how to install a toilet?
There you go.
All they know is killing and white uniforms. And then he basically says, all right, you look like a roofer. Yeah, some juicy government job. Anyway, the point is that the second Death Star was still under construction, so a whole bunch of innocent, contractors got blown up with the Death Star, right? Is his point.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not too far off. I didn't go with the precise killing, but more like, you wanted to show up for work, but it got terrorist exploded, right? And now your whole economy for your family and your town, because you were like the supplier for whatever that was, now you're impacted, but not in a we gotta get revenge because they killed my boy kind of thing, but more of a I'm in a bad economic state. I am eating dirt because of this fanatical thing that happened, this political battle.
Well, and I think you just nailed the exact look that's on Cyril's face when he's sitting there with his mom. He's like, if it wasn't for these punks, I'd still have my weird orange and blue uniform, and I wouldn't have to be sitting here listening to my mom rip me a new one. Like that. Speaking of radicalization, that's how you create an evil nemesis too.
Yeah, he's totally, like, his whole life is wrapped up in this job, and he was, in his own mind, he was doing the right thing. He was, acting responsibly, and he's gonna get somehow he's gonna get back involved with this fight because he was right and he's gonna stick to that theory, right? So we have to wait and see what's gonna happen. When he's sort of the wild card here, right?
Yeah. He's obviously gonna end up back in the main swing of things eventually, but how is the interesting part, and it may or may not involve killing his mother.
Yeah. So let's move on to the Green Council, House of Dragon, Season 1, Episode 9.
Mm-hmm. My pitch: as word of King Viserys' death spreads, lines are drawn while the Hightowers plot to take the throne.
So I have a question. I didn't go back and watch the previous episode, but at the very end, she does go visit him in his bed, King Viserys in his bedroom. Mm-hmm. Does he actually say that he would like, or is he just like in the milk of the poppy dreaming?
No. So what happens is the night before, Rhaenyra comes to him and she's struggling with what to do because she's realizing like the Greens are massing power. She's in a hard spot. She thinks that her dad is basically on his deathbed and she's going to go face Otto Hightower sitting on the throne. And he's going to be like, your son is a bastard and you don't have any claim to Driftmark. And so she's basically preparing for losing, but she knows the prophecy. She knows that there has to be a Targaryen on the throne and that, he wants her to be it to help prepare for the inevitable long night that's coming with the north of the wall. So she goes to him in the previous episode and says, hey, I know you're stoned out on poppy juice here, but I have to ask you, do you believe it's true? Do you believe that the prophecy is true? And he doesn't answer her there, but when she says basically, I need your help, that gets through then. So he goes downstairs and he helps her, and then he goes up to his bed and he's dying that next night. And when Alicent comes in and sits on the other side of the bed, and starts talking to him. He thinks that it's Rhaenyra again because he's old and delusional and about to die. And he says, what you asked me before about the prophecy, the prince that was promised, you know, Aegon. And he says Aegon because he's talking about Aegon's prophecy. He says the prince that was promised, Aegon. And so it's a misinterpretation. Alicent hears that and thinks, oh, Aegon is the prince. He should sit the throne. So they're twisting it to be that she thinks she's on the side of right because he said the word Aegon. What he was talking about was the original King Aegon who made the prophecy about the Long Night.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's sprinkled in that he was starting to lose it a bit because there was, where the big battle between Rhaenyra and Alicent, he was like not having it. He accidentally ended up calling Alicent Emma, his previous wife, his deceased wife's name. So like he was already struggling as the, more than age, but like a rapid deterioration aging from the disease that he had was already starting to addle him. So it's not surprising that towards the end there, Milk of the Poppy, missing like half his face, that he's kind of not even fully aware that he's not talking to Rhaenyra, he's talking to Alicent, and because everybody's named like the same 5 names.
Yeah, exactly.
Throughout history, it's a little confusing. She doesn't ask him like, Aegon, our son? He would have been like, son? No, the Conqueror. What are you talking about? We don't have a son. You're my daughter. It would have been a little bit more clear, even in his addled way.
And even more complicated than that, Jaime, is the fact that on that previous day, when Daemon and Rhaenyra show up, they show up with 2 of their sons, one of whom is named Aegon. So there's literally 2 Prince Aegons at this point. So what a mess. Yeah, I mean, it's literally, it's gonna get bad. Like they've said the next 2 to 3 seasons are all going to be about the Civil War between these 2 sides, and it's going to get bad. A lot of the people we've already met are going to die. A lot more characters are going to get introduced, and they're going to die. And it's all going to be basically down to not just the power play, although we do see that amazing scene in the Green Council, which we'll talk about, but it really comes down to a misunderstanding. Like all this bloodshed and it's going to start to get really personal, and yeah, all these people are going to die, and it's all basically because Alicent thinks she's on the side of right, and Rhaenyra thinks she's on the side of right, and Rhaenyra is doing what she thinks she needs to do because her dad told her to, and Alicent thinks she's doing what she needs to do because her husband told her to.
Yeah, people do kind of point out, obviously, a whole bunch of folks in this episode were like, "Oh, your husband with his dying breath said this thing that counteracts, happens to be in your favor and counteracts what he like heroically, took his decaying body across the entire throne room to be like, why am I even here? I should be pooping myself in bed for this thing that we resolved like 20 years ago. Like, I've been very clear, Rhaenyra is my heir. Why am I even here? Her own son is like, yeah, I'm sure, Mom. I'm sure he said that thing that's conveniently good for me and you. It's a tough one. It's a tough line for her to hold on to, even though I do understand why she believes it because of the confusion.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Green Council, because I want to get to the way the reactions of locking down the kingdom after that, right?
Yeah. So I mean, it starts out pretty chill, where the little page boy finds the king dead, and he doesn't go to the queen, and he doesn't go to the Hand. He goes to Talia, right? The woman who we know works for the White Worm. Yeah, White Worm.
Yeah.
And she immediately goes to the window and starts lighting candles, sending the signal across the kingdom that the king is dead, so that sort of gets out there. That's what triggers the whole missing Aegon plot that happens later on. But then, basically as news spreads, they convene this meeting of the High Council, and, all the players for Team Green are in the room, and Alicent's like, well, here's what happened. He told me on his deathbed that he wanted Aegon to be the king. And Otto doesn't miss a beat. He's like, cool, we were going to take the throne anyways, so that's even better. So I don't have to fight you, my daughter, on this. I already had a plan. it's really like dark scene where, you know, she realizes that and that comes back later on, she realizes what a pawn she is in this whole game, right? Like her dad's playing, you know, three-dimensional chess, and, you know, and she's playing checkers, right?
Yeah, because like almost everybody in that council was in on it and was like, yeah, we didn't want to, you know, have you sully your hands with this dirty work, my queen, except for like that one guy who was like, this is
Marie.
Yeah, where he, you know, he takes a little nap at the end of the scene there.
Yeah, he basically stands up and says, he says, I'm 76 years old, and I knew Viserys longer than any of you, and I know this isn't what he wanted, and you guys have been conspiring, and I am disgusted. And Kristen Cole slams him down on the table so hard that he kills him, and they continue the meeting. They just like, well, we just killed the septuagenarian, we better keep going.
Can make it on without cracking a few eggs, you know. That's there.
It's awful. And of course that leads to the great the Harold Westerling, who's the captain of the King's Guard at that point, basically says, like, you know, there is no king right now, peace out, I'm out of here. Like he's done with all this, right? And he's like, I'm out. And the rest of them are like, you know, cool, we're just gonna go take the throne now. But then that leads to the inevitable question, where in the world is Aegon Targaryen? Which was really, honestly, that was what I was going to put down for my synopsis of the elevator pitch for this episode. Where in the world is Aegon Targaryen? Because the whole episode becomes this, you know, what are they need the king, they need the prince to put on the throne to become the king. Where the heck is this guy? And so, you know, that sort of sprints onward. Meanwhile, they decide, after that great council meeting, they decide, well, you know, we better start, you know, figuring out who's on our side beyond this room. And they take Princess Rhaenys, who of course is the lady of Driftmark, and they lock her in her room and are like, guess what? Remember how you were here for you know, family dinner and an appeal? You know, now you're a political prisoner. They lock up all the servants in the castle so they can't go tell their people what's going on. And they basically bring all of the high lords and ladies into the throne room and put, you know, Otto back on the throne again as the hand. And he says, you know, the king is dead. You are, when you basically, I know you already, you know, said you would show fealty to Rhaenyra, but that's not going to happen. Bend the knee to my guy now or else. And almost everybody, with a few exceptions, bends the knee, even though they know they're now oath breakers and they know that this isn't right. They're basically like, well, I'm going to die if I don't do this. And yeah, it just turns into this huge, like, you know, political catastrophe. Like, it's just, it's so insidious, right? Like, you just find yourself just being like, oh, this is so gross.
Yeah, and if you don't agree with bending the knee, you're going to die. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons why half of them do. And they take one example and they basically, you know, right in front of everybody else, right? They make an example of them to show that if you're going to stand there and say, I'm with Rhaenyra, they're going to just off you right there in front of them, right? So at which point the one cowardly guy bends his knee, right?
Well, so then, a bunch of them sort of see that example of getting, you know, hauled away, and they're like, okay, so... yeah, it's Caswell, who we saw. He's the one who's on the stairs when Rhaenyra's got the newborn and she's running up the stairs to show the baby to the queen. He's the one who's coming down the stairs and sort of says, you know, hey, good to see you. And his name's Alan Caswell. And he's the one who reluctantly bends his knee. And then, you know, later in the episode, he's like, yeah, no, totally, I'm with you guys. I'm just going to step outside with my horse for a bit. And of course, they catch him and they hang him. So, you know, yet another ally. Although it's a strange thing. Like, if your plot was, we're going to take the throne, bend the knee. Okay, some of those people are clearly going to bend the knee and do what they're told. But then they're probably, if they're still allegiant to Rhaenyra, they might go back to their, you know, castles or areas or whatever, and then say, yeah, no, I was lying. You were going to kill me. Forget you. Some people have the willpower to be like, no, I'm not doing that. So they're either thrown in jail or killed. It's not clear. In the books, they're all beheaded. Here, they don't make it clear what their fates are. But I wonder if, like, wouldn't it have made sense to be like, cool, you're not with us? You're going down to the jail. because we're going to tell your family that if they don't also show fealty to us, we're going to chop your head off. So, like, aren't they a better play to have as a hostage and not a corpse?
It probably depends. You probably want a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B. It's, to your point, pretty common to have wards of some sort. Like Theon Greyjoy was you'll never attack the Starks because we've got your heir that we'll kill. So he's our hostage. He's treated very nicely. He kind of forgets he's a hostage until Tyrion reminds him. But I think you probably also still need a little bit like, will they really kill? Yeah, man, they killed that dude. They killed that one guy. We're not taking no chances. This is not a joke.
Yeah, but by the same token, though, if you kill the head of the household, then the house becomes the next in lines, and that person, if they're he's sitting at home, doesn't know what's going on, and he still believes that his family is in Rhaenyra's camp, right? So
yeah,
kind of doesn't make sense. But then politics.
Yeah,
but there's also no telephone or anything, so you'd be like, hey, so we have him
Raven,
hostage,
right?
so you need to come to the castle and unhostage him. Oh, now you're a hostage, haha. Right? There's no like, let me hear their voice on the telephone to make sure that the hostage is still alive, kind of thing. So you can deal with the confusion for a little bit longer than you could.
Yeah, it's partying at the castle, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. My big question related to this whole lockdown thing is, should dragon riders have like a horn or a bell or something to summon their dragons? Because Rhaenys could have used a like Kool-Aid Man moment to like get herself out of the tower, right?
Yep. Although she does get her Kool-Aid Man moment later on, so yeah, maybe. Oh, I'd have given anything for her to come out of there and go, oh yeah. Yeah, so they go from like imprisoning these people and killing them to the mission becomes go find Aegon. He's somewhere in the city, go find Aegon. And it's kind of a little bit unclear as to why there is the competing two sides. Now, the idea, I guess, is that Otto wants to get him so that he can say to him, hey, you're going to be the king now. The first thing you're going to do is order the death of Rhaenyra and Daemon and their family because they're a threat to you. Whereas Alicent is like, hey, I'm going to get him and I'm going to tell him that. But he's still in the castle. Like, if just because Otto is like not in the end, not the winner of this little let's go find Aegon game, couldn't he still be like, he's still the hand. He's still going to be there. He still has a measure of power. Can't he be like, psst, by the way, these people hate you. You should probably take care of. Like, it's so a little bit overdone for my taste. I thought it was a little bit weird that they were like competing so hard for something that like Otto's clearly good at making plans. He had this whole thing laid out. Why doesn't he just play the long game and be like, cool, whatever you say, daughter. By the way, Aegon, I'll get you all the kid fighting and debauchery that you want, as long as you do all the stuff that I want you to do, including killing your aunt and your uncle and your cousins and stuff and your nephews.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the thing about it is and it has to do with monarchy and coronations and stuff like that, right? Because I mean, it's like Queen Elizabeth who just died, right? I mean, when the dude broke the stick over her coffin, right? Mm-hmm. That signified that he was done being her the keeper of her like the head of her house, right? And at that point in time, she becomes just a person. She's no longer the queen in the eyes of the god, right? Because that's the whole thing about the British monarchy, is that the queen is, God's representative on earth, kind of in the same sense the Pope is, right?
By divine right, yes.
By divine right, exactly. So at some point during that ceremony, like they can't bury her as a queen; they have to bury her as a person, right? Mm-hmm. And King Charles III is not a king until is not officially the king until he's coronated by the head of the church, right? Mm-hmm. So in the same sense that they have to find this kid who's off doing whatever he's doing, drinking or forcing young boys to fight. That was a horrible scene, by the way. But he's off, and all those ne'er-do-wells down in the city could have held him hostage and for a bag of gold or whatever, because at that point in time he's still just a person, even though he's in theoretically in line for the throne, right? So until I mean, and I would assume that that's sort of the lore that's driving this whole king coronation. You know, whoever's going to sit on the, I mean, sitting on the Iron Throne is the one thing, right? But somebody has to place a crown on your head, which they do in the scene that we're going to talk about with the dragon, right? But you know, they go, when they do find him, they actually put the crown on his head, and that's when he becomes king, right?
Yep. Sorry to say, but you're right though, and that's kind of the White Worm's play. So you know, she, you know, Missandra, the White Worm, who's sort of the master of, you know, secrets and whispers and whatever else. She gets that signal at the beginning of the episode saying like, "Hey, the king is dead," and she basically grabs him up and hides him. And that's, you know, the game of hide
under a table or something, right?
Yeah. Well, it's under the same place in the sept or the church that we see earlier in the season. That's where Rhaenyra and Alicent are praying, right? Where Alicent is trying to teach Rhaenyra how to pray to the faith of the Seven, as opposed to her wicked dragony ways. So yeah, it's funny that it sort of comes full circle on that one. But yeah, she basically, Missandra kidnaps him and basically uses him as a power play to say, hey, by the way, there's these illegal children fights down here where they sharpen the children's nails and file their teeth to points. Yeah. Dear sword, dear hand of the king, if I give you your guy back, how about you make that against the law? And he's like, well, I'll think about it. And so that's kind of how that sort of plays out. And that's why, you know, that's what sort of drives Aegon above ground. And then we get, of course, the duel between, did you not love Eric and Arik? The Caswell twins, or what are they called? The not the Caswell twins. They're the other ones. They're the what are their names? Oh, I'll have to look that up. But yeah, anyway, the twins Eric and Arik are basically looking for him on the one side, and then you know, we've got Aemon, the one-eyed prince, and Kristen Cole looking for on the other side. And we had the sword fight, and then the one guy who was with Aegon his whole life, he was a sworn sword, Eric, the one twin, is like
Cargill.
See, I knew it was close. I love that he's just like, this dude is not worth fighting over. He's a POS, and you know, there's just no way. There's no way that this guy should be the king, and I'm not fighting for, you know, to keep him, to get him back, to get a crown on his head. But he kind of pieces out. His brother ends up losing the fight. And yeah, they're kind of on opposite sides of the fence on this thing now. And he ends up basically being the one who, once they grab up Aegon, it ends up being Kristen Cole who gets him and takes him back. And so therefore he's theoretically under the sway of Alicent. But really it's about the disenchantment that Eric feels in this horrible person. Like, we already knew that Aegon is a rapist. We established in this episode that he's got bastard children down in Flea Bottom, and that he likes to watch children beat each other to death. So we know he's a real piece of work. And Eric, seeing all this, is just like, this guy's going to be king? No effing way. He goes back to the castle and he grabs Princess. He grabs Rhaenys and says, let's get out of here. And so they end up walking through the city, and they end up, you know, she ends up getting swept up and separated from him, and she ends up in the dragon pit. And that's how she ends up during the coronation scene. She disappears downstairs in the dragon pit, and, you know, and then she makes her hasty entrance where, you know, riding her dragon Meleese, she busts through the floor like the Kool-Aid Man and kills. What's your estimate, guys? How many people do you think died when that dragon went through the floor?
A few.
Yeah, there were people wondering about this on the internet, and we'll come back to the Flea Bottom discussion, because that's how I understood what happens. But it's easily at least 50, right? Dead, and then
I would have
maybe
guessed
like
a
few hundred more injured at least, right? It's a little unclear exactly what's dead versus what's horribly mangled.
I mean, between the people who died just when the floor goes up, and then the people who fell through where the floor was, and then the people who got stepped on or whacked with a tail or whatever else, like, I think it's in the dozens.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah. What an amazing scene, though. You know, you get this moment where they drive all the common people into the dragon pits. There's thousands of people there, and they do the coronation. They're like, guess what? King's dead. Here's the new guy. They put the crown on his head. And Aegon the Reluctant, who wasn't really keen on being king, he basically says, I'm not fit for it. He tells his brother, I'm not fit for it. And his brother goes, you don't have to tell me, I know, which I thought was really hilarious. And then they have the coronation, and, he's got this, ancestral sword. He's got the crown on his head. He's like, yeah, okay, maybe I can get behind this. And then the dragon bursts through the floor, and you end up with this sort of showdown of like, well, what's going to happen here? And obviously it would have been poor for storytelling purposes if she just said Dracarys and barbecued the lot of them. But that was my big question for this episode, is why doesn't she just say Dracarys and torch the whole lot of them?
Well, I mean, you got that. My favorite scene, my favorite pew-pew was when the dragon, like roars at them, right? And you're right, doesn't build up the ball of flame in this thing. But how come they weren't all covered with spittle after that?
They should have been, shouldn't they?
Like they should have looked like, from the Ghostbusters. They should have been covered in slime,
Yep.
All squinting and wiping it from their eyes and stuff. But yeah, I think that was pretty much her saying, I mean, you're right though. If she had just torched them, then the show's over and we all go home, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I did see some stuff online about this. So that scene was not in the book. That scene was a show invention, just to add some pew-pew to an episode that otherwise is really just politics, right? So I guess the point of doing it that way is that she is supposed to say in that moment, because she has that great... I think the Green Council scene is amazing. The one scene we kind of skipped over is the scene where Alicent goes to see Rhaenyra in the... Rhaenys inside the Red Keep. And she basically says, hey, here's the deal. We'll put you in charge of your own area down there. You can be the lady down there. Like, we'll sell you. Here's all the things we can do for you. And the response back from Rhaenys was my quote, which was, she says, you desire not to be free, but to make a window in your prison. She basically says, like, you are thinking small, person here. Like, you really aren't seeing the big picture. Right now, you hold all the cards, and yet you are just trying to carve out a view as opposed to, sitting the throne, right? And it comes back in the end. I think the interpretation that I've seen that most people have adopted on some of the blogs I've been looking at and stories I've been looking at this week, the consensus is, well, in that moment, she's thinking about barbecuing the lot of them, and she sees Alicent step in front of her kids and says in that moment, well, I'm a mom, you're a mom, my kids are dead, I don't want to be somebody who kills a mom defending her kids too.
Right. That's how I interpreted why they set it up the way they did, with Rhaenys understanding, like, oh, you're not even really doing this to grab power, because you'd be doing that for yourself. At worst, you're grabbing power for your child. And that's why I feel like she doesn't kill her there. And there were definitely people who were like, wait, but what about all those people who got killed? It's like, well, let me tell you, to the nobles, those are not people. No. Right? As evidenced by the fact that, they have this, child fighting ring that is just like okay, we'll add it to the list. We'll get to that. And it's not like what? That's terrible. Of course we're getting rid of that. There was no view of them as anything other than pawns. So that's, I think, a reflection of the nobility versus the peasantry.
Yep.
That it feels awful to modern folks, but probably isn't that different from like the ultra rich. Like, do you think an Elon Musk is going to shed a tear for like 50 people versus the one person he kind of likes?
Oh, absolutely.
It's a different thing. Yeah.
Yeah. The other part that we
is it too soon to call them pit kids?
Yeah, really. The other part we didn't, there's two scenes we haven't talked about, that one of them we're going to have to get into. We'll save that one for last. But the other thing that we sort of didn't really circle back on is the prophecy, right? So Aegon's sister wife has been making these sort of prognostications, these dreams come true statements throughout the whole season, right? And she makes the statement in the previous episode, and then again here, she says, beware the beast beneath the boards. And so whenever she says something now, immediately my radar goes off. I'm like, what are they foreshadowing? What's going to be the thing? And of course, the beast beneath the boards in this one is Melis popping out and killing people and putting the whole family in danger, including her. So that part was really interesting. So again, it really makes you want to sort of perk up every time that young woman says something. You're like, okay, all right, let's keep our eyes peeled for the clues to what this might actually be connected to. But the scene of the show, maybe I'm wrong. So we talked about the Green Council, amazing scene. We talked about the scene between Alicent and Rhaenys, amazing scene. Those two actresses were killing it in that scene. We have not talked about Larys Strong and the foot scene.
Oh, the foot scene? The foot fetish? Oh.
He was definitely into that, and it was unique. You've seen so much of pushing the boundaries for television that Game of Thrones has had just from the very get-go, and they include here with like best uncle ever quips and stuff that we can make. But I would not have predicted this particular scene. That is off into the wilderness when it comes to this sort of thing.
It's so funny. So, of course, the scene is that Larys is sort of this competing master of whispers. He's the one who, has gone so far as to kill his own brother and father in order to please the queen. He is sort of connected deeply to all these different things and knows all these things that's helping her establish her position and solidify her position. But we never really get the quid pro quo. Like, what is it that he wants back from her until this episode where when he's talking to her and he's trying to sort of give her information, and you sort of see the game going back and forth. At first she takes off her shoes and you're like, well, that's unusual because a queen generally wouldn't do that in front of a subject, even if they were close friends. And then you see her slide off her stockings or her socks and you're like, okay. And then you see her turn sideways and start wiggling her toes and you're just like, oh my goodness. And then you see Larys's hand disappear and you're like, oh, okay, so this has gone here then. Okay, cool. No kink shaming if you're into feet. Cool, whatever. But this is not about foot fetishizing. This is about power, right? She's using her power as a woman and a sexual person to take advantage of his information. He's extorting her basically to give her the information in exchange for getting to do kind of debauched things to someone who's willing but not happy about what she's doing. So it's an interesting power dynamic in that scene because you think she's the queen, she has the power, but she kind of doesn't. And it does speak to the sort of the exploitation of women across the series, right? That no matter how powerful a woman is, she's still, to some men, she's still a sex object. She's still lesser, to be taken, to be had, not to be given, right? And it's also a beautiful juxtaposition because she's squirming while she's doing it. She's not looking. She's very uncomfortable with it in the same way that we saw her, when she was being in bed with her husband Viserys when he's trying to impregnate her. She is not having a good time. She's not a happy and willing participant. She's doing it because it's her duty, not because it's her pleasure. And the the juxtaposition of that with Rhaenyra, who is a sexual person and takes pleasure in sex and is very empowered by her sexuality, both when she, is messing around with her uncle and then messing around with her sworn sword and Kristen Cole. And then, in later episodes, she's sleeping with Harwin Strong, who we know that they were in love with each other and they had a great sex life. And then she's already pumped out like multiple kids with Daemon over the last 6 years. So clearly there's a good sex life there too. So I thought that scene was really, really rich and there was a lot to pull from it, in spite of the fact that it was also really kind of off-putting and gross.
Depends on your perspective, I guess, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's been one of the questions that I've had circling in my head the whole season was, what does Larys want? Like, is he, because Littlefinger, he's sort of the equivalent to Littlefinger from Game of Thrones, right? Littlefinger's always working angles and trying to get power and everything else, but his ultimate goal was get to the top of the ladder. And initially it's get Catelyn Stark, right? We didn't really have the motivation. Like, what does Larys want? What is he building towards? We did not realize what he was building towards was underneath the Queen's shoes, but now we know.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, the thing about it is he's a cripple, right? And he couldn't run his father's household because of that, right? And so even though he's technically a lord, he doesn't have, he's not physically able to pick up a sword, fight somebody, right? So he has to sort of worm his way into use his influence in his position to get this position of power, and he had to have something over Alicent because she can't get rid of him. Kind of.
Well,
thing,
that's
right?
it, right? Now we've already established he will go to great lengths to get what he wants. He killed his brother. Killing your father and your brother. It's a power play in a lot of different ways, but it's also heinous and monstrous. This guy's somebody who's clearly committed to his cause. So again, spinning that up against her, she knows that he's a loose cannon, and he's probably better under her thumb than not, right?
Yeah.
All right, predictions. Last episode. So by the time
before we get into that, just I want to a note here. I found that according to George R.R. Martin, Aegon usurping the Iron Throne is from Rhaenyra is actually based on a real situation where King Henry I of England in 1135 had named his only daughter and only legitimate child Matilda to be his heir of England's. She'd be England's first queen, right? Queen Regent, and but the throne was usurped from Matilda by her cousin Stefan de Bois, who arrived in London and was crowned while she was away in France, right? And Stefan's claims was backed by reports that the king had changed his mind on his deathbed.
Yeah, I knew that he pulled stuff from real life. That's a great one.
Yeah, cool. So what? Lead on, Macduff.
Yeah, so we talked about. This episode, by the time you're hearing this, the final episode will have aired. There's one episode left. End of the season. We won't get more until hopefully next year. Do you guys have any thoughts, predictions, concerns? Does it end? Do we see the actual outbreak of the Civil War? Do we see more politicking? Where do you think it goes on the last episode? Are we going to get a key player off the board? Like what's going to happen?
Yeah, I think somebody's got to go. I mean, at this point, and it's got to be dramatic. It's got to, lead us into the next season, right? So,
yeah, good cliffhanger moments of.
There's going to be the scene with Rhaenyra and Daemon going, "What? What happened?"
Yeah. I mean, do you think that they find out from is it basically Rhaenys flies straight there and says, "Guess what?"
Yeah, that or a raven has already been on its way or something like that,
Yeah,
because they do get a raven about Driftmark at the beginning of two episodes ago, right?
Yeah, I wonder though. I wonder if it's going to be because as we talked about, theoretically, Alicent won this little battle for control of Aegon in the short term. I wonder if it's a note that basically says, "Hey, we've crowned him. This is what the king wanted. You guys need to basically stand down," because she didn't want Rhaenyra killed, right? Or the family.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's not we come in guns a-blazing. I wonder if it's like, hey, we've done this thing. You should probably just roll with it. And that sort of starts because Daemon's not going to take this. As much as mad as Rhaenyra is going to be, Daemon's going to be homicidal.
Yeah, true. The other people are at Rhaenyra and Daemon are at Driftmark right now?
No, they would have gone back to Dragonstone. So that's where they are.
Okay.
So yeah, they're at Dragonstone. The only person at Driftmark would be theoretically Corlys, the Lord, and he was not in good shape at last report. But the whole family, so Rhaenyra, Daemon, their kids, plus her kids from Harwin, Luke and Jace and Joffrey, would have all been back to Dragonstone, because that's what she basically says in the last episode. I got to take the kids home. I'll be back, and then this all happens. It'll be interesting to see too, especially we see the politicking happening when Alicent goes to Rhaenys and says, hey, we would really use you on our side. She's doing the math, because in spite of the fact that they kind of poached Vhagar, the giant, the biggest dragon in the land, there's a lot more dragons on Team Black than there is on Team Green. I wonder.
Yeah.
I wonder how that plays out. If there's going to be a take out the dragon suicide mission in season 2, or again, I don't really have a sense of how the war plays out. I might actually read the book between seasons just because I'm curious now. But I'm curious to see sort of we know that this Dance of the Dragons, this huge civil war, isn't just about, basically breaking this family line down, but it's dragons, right? Because we know by the time we get to 160 years from now, not only are there far fewer Targaryens, but there are no dragons.
And all the Jedi are gone too, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see a key player or a dragon taken off the board in the next episode, just to spice it up. Something dramatic,
Cute. Yeah. Well, no, it definitely has to be something to lead us to the next season for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because usually the season in traditional sort of 10 episode seasons of Game of Thrones, it's episode 9 tends to be the sort of big set piece kind of giant thing, and then episode 10 tends to be sort of, stage setting for the next season, sending people off in different directions, time for them to walk from place to place, right? Because that was the joke about Game of Thrones, is a lot of walking. It'll be interesting to see where they leave this one off. If it's going to leave on a high of, the war has begun, or if it's going to be like, something more subtle.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Well, let's move on to our watch list in the meantime. Jaime, what do you got for us?
So I made reference to the Kool-Aid Man a few different times, and I realized that not everybody may know. I don't know if they still run these commercials, the same sort of boisterous enthusiasm, but the traditional sort of Kool-Aid Man commercial is kids doing something. It literally doesn't matter in this one that I've put in the show notes. It's from 1978. It's a bank robbers. So 2 kids and a police officer who's not very good at his job are apparently trying to track down and stop some bank robbers from getting away with their heist. And they get cornered by said bank robbers until the Kool-Aid Man comes bursting through the brick wall and saves the day. Right? He's the overpowered dragon in this metaphor. So it's really short. It's 30 seconds. I highly recommend watching. This is the charming era of the Kool-Aid Man. And if you've seen that meme on like Family Guy and stuff, that's where that comes from. For those of you who,
I thought he was a jug of Kool-Aid. I didn't realize he was a man per se.
Well, yes and yes. I mean, he is a pitcher of a glass pitcher of Kool-Aid, anthropomorphized as a man, the Kool-Aid Man.
Okay.
And then he pours himself when somebody says Dracarys, he pours himself out over people.
I guess
It becomes this weird sick fetish
or something.
I didn't know you were going to go there, Jaime, but thank you.
Consume the liquid that comes from my body. It's like, okay. There's no positive way to view this interaction.
Oh my goodness.
It's sticky sweet.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, I can't top that, but I'm gonna give my thoughts anyways. So we've got another Star Wars series coming next week on Disney Plus, Tales of the Jedi, which we got a teaser for a few months back, I think at Comic-Con or D23, I can't remember which one, but this is the series that is a series of shorts focusing on sort of the twin paths that are experienced by Ahsoka when she's a little girl and sort of going through the, finding out she's a Jedi and sort of maturing and her experience becoming a Jedi, and then also Dooku, Count Dooku, who did start out as a Padawan and then a Jedi, and crossed paths with some pretty important Jedi along the way. His he was, I think Qui-Gon was his apprentice, and so we're gonna get some familiar faces. This is also set in the same style as Clone Wars, so it'll be very familiar faces, style of animation, and everything for people who are Clone Wars fans. So I'm not sure what to expect from it. I never know what to expect from a short. How much are they really going to get into? How, all of that. But I am excited to see a little bit more of the backstory, especially for Ahsoka, as we know we're getting an Ahsoka series coming down the road. So seeing more of her, getting a little bit more of her backstory is interesting. And even just the Dooku of it all, trying to see, how did he fall? Why did he fall? What was it? We know that from a little bit from the books and some of the ancillary information we've gotten, but to see it come to life and to see, this sort of disenchantment turning into evil is a tantalizing thing. So I'm excited about the series, and it comes next week. I think it's the 26th.
Yeah, that is Wednesday. I got to mark my calendar for that one.
Yeah.
And I didn't see, is it going to come out like the other anthology, or is it like a weekly? Did you see anything about distribution?
I haven't. It didn't say like it was premiering. It sounds like it's kind of dropping. Like I get the feeling it's more like was the one Forky Lends a Hand or whatever it was called, the one from Toy Story.
Sporky.
Oh, is it Sporky? Yeah, Sporky. They did like a whole series of those where there were like shorts. The same thing as the ones from Up, right? They did the Doug Days, where they kind of dropped 8 episodes of Doug Days or whatever.
All right. Well, October 23rd, 2022 is going to be the Power of the Doctor premiering probably across the globe on BBC and in Canada, and who knows what it's doing in the States. I don't really care. But this is the end of Jodie Whittaker's run as the Doctor on the Doctor Who series. So, and I've forgotten the name of the new actor who's taking her place, but she's going to regenerate into him, and he'll take over, and he'll probably say absolutely brilliant when he converts to her. Him. Yeah, them. Maybe he'll be a they. I don't know. But yeah, that's coming up.
It goes by him. It's Nkutigatwa is the actor's name, and he.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I meant in the character in the show, but so this would be on this Sunday coming up, right? 23rd. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, tune in, folks. It came out of kind of nowhere too. Were you surprised that it kind of went from like nothing to like, oh, by the way, it's coming in like 8 days or 9 days? No.
I mean, that's what Doctor Who does, I guess.
They've been hinting towards it for the last, couple of months. I've sort of seen things. There was because they dropped that one weird episode about the sea aliens or whatever they were. The last Doctor Who was kind of out there. It was like in the middle of nowhere. I think probably because of COVID and production timing messed up or whatever. The last 2 episodes of Doctor Who were sort of weirdly timed,
Mm-hmm.
Like, in fact, I knew the sea. I mentioned it on the show coming, and it was a chunk of time before that one came out, right? Yep. Or was that a Christmas one? I can't remember.
But they did. I think it was New Year's again this year, wasn't it?
Well, it was a New Year's show, but then there was another show after that, right? During the year, because the New Year's one was the one about the store. Or whatever.
Yeah.
It was elevators and things like that involved. I like that show. That was an interesting one, but. The Sea Shanty one, I didn't really care for, but I think that was leading up to this episode, but this is a Cybermen episode because based on what I've seen on Facebook and stuff. All right, and then so just in keeping in the Jodie Whittaker theme, I wanted to talk about 2 other pieces that she was in. If I had to pick shows that relate to this show. Attack the Block from 2011. She is one of her roles where she's the lead actress in it. She plays a young lady who gets mugged by a bunch of hoodlums in a neighborhood, and then there's like these space aliens that take over, and she and her muggers sort of team up to take on these people. And one of the lead muggers is John Boyega, and it was one of his roles before Force Awakens, which was 2015. So I think they were probably very close. He probably got the role of in Star Wars before they made it was around the same time. But anyway, this movie did come out 3 years before Force Awakens. It's a really good movie if you're into sci-fi, and I'm surprised it's not on as a Halloween sort of thing because it's got that sort of vibe to it. It's very very British in a sense, but it's a really, really good movie. So check it out. And then the series Broadchurch. I think Broadchurch was 2 seasons. It was called something different in the American version, and I can't remember if Jodie Whittaker was in the American version or not. But because David Tennant plays an inspector, and Olivia Colman plays his. He's like the big hotshot detective coming from out of town, and Olivia Colman is the local detective, and the 2 of them team up to solve a child's murder, and Jodie Whittaker plays the mother of the child who's murdered. And so that goes on for two seasons, right? So really interesting series. I don't know if you've seen it at all, but I highly recommend it. Lots of good stuff happening in that one. And I wasn't going to talk about the Handmaid's Tale. I've been watching, I think we're in the 5th season now. But we've been the gist of it is obviously is Elizabeth Olsen plays, is that her name? Yeah, right. She plays handmaid. Offred is her name in the show, and she gets out of.
I think it's Elizabeth Moss.
Gilead,
where what you're looking for.
Elizabeth Moss. Yes, thank you, Elizabeth Moss. Yeah, she gets out of Gilead, and Sabrina is her nemesis, who I mentioned last week. And this season has sort of been pitting the two of them against each other. And the last episode was a complete plot twist. The whole plot turned left. So I'm back on the bandwagon of recommending this show. It's a lot of feels in this show because it's about women and their roles in society and how twisted one society can be. At the end of last season, Elizabeth Moss' character made it to Canada, to Toronto, right? So she gets out of Gilead. Gilead is part of the United States in this future sci-fi.
It only looks like downtown Toronto.
And then the last thing...
only looks like downtown Toronto.
Yeah, Toronto stands in for Boston in this particular show. So, and plus, some of the buildings. I think Justin was involved in a couple of episodes of this show too. My nephew, and it's filmed. Some of the houses are filmed in that they're in, or some of the richier neighborhoods in Toronto as well, where the houses are really nice. And on Apple TV, Shantaratam came out. It's a show starring Charlie Hunnam from Sons of Anarchy. In his native Australian accent, he plays an Aussie, and who ends up in India. And interesting, sort of. It's like set in the 30s, I want to say, 30s or 40s, and he plays an ex-con who ends up in India and basically ends up working as a doctor. So I've watched the first 3 episodes, I think. They dropped 2 on a week ago, and then the last one just came out on Friday. So yeah, it's on Apple TV. Check it out, really good, and looking forward to seeing where this one goes. So those are my watch list items. And that's it for another week. So hey, Jonathan, people want to get in touch with you. Where would they find you?
Oh, I've been waiting for this. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram as @JPK News, or you can find me on YouTube as at youtube.com/JPK.
Ooh, is that new?
They just added the custom tags, so yeah, youtube.com/JPK.
Cool, I have to check that out. Mine's still my name, but I don't know if I would change it. And Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you, where do they find you?
I'm on Twitter as @DevTheHair. And get your tag before it runs out.
Mine came, so I don't know. I'm around 10,000 followers. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but they sent me a note.
Yeah, maybe
they sent me a note that basically said, "Get your tag in." I was like, "Okay, I will."
Yeah, I'm just some sort of random series of characters, I guess, right? So you're like YouTube channel blah blah blah, or you're just YouTube JPK now?
It's youtube.com/JPK.
How did you get that?
They sent me a note and said, "Click this link, go here, pick your tag, and off you go."
All right. Well, I guess until next time, we'll see you in the future. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
You've been listening to the Spockcast podcast. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spockcast website at spockcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spockcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpockcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spockcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spockcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
feel like I missed my window on the Doctor Who thing, actually. A friend of mine who used to work at...
Oh, introducing YouTube handles. I just got the email.
There you go. A friend of mine used to work at Space, now CTV Sci-Fi, and he sent a note out just a few days before the information came out that they were going to move that Doctor Who special. I was like, oh, I got a scoop, but then it was gone by the time we recorded. The scoop was gone. I was like, oh, damn, missed my window. It's going to be our first scoop, but no, missed it.
What's going to be your first scoop? Sorry.
Well, getting ahead of the getting the information out there ahead of the announcement that they were going to put that Doctor Who special on. He sent a note out saying, "Hey, by the way, Who fan, their special's coming." And I was like, "Cool," but that was like, I think Saturday or Sunday last weekend. So it was between our recordings, so I couldn't get it into our podcast fast enough.
So my custom URL is currently channel URL. Is that what you changed, or you changed your custom URL?
Yeah, my handle. So
your handle, because my custom URL currently is youtube.com/c/Timitra.
C for Canada?
Candle. I guess this is an easy to remember web address for you. I guess they just but then this yeah. So do you know about using a like, I don't, on Twitter I don't have like, if you go to my Twitter account and or my Twitter handle and you look at my profile, in there it's not just like, I haven't just got a description that is me, but there's like a link, what's it called, link URL or something like that. Let me get to my profile here.
Your link.bio is like a link tree of some sort?
Yeah, link.bio/Tim Mitra, and then in there I can put in all kinds of things. Like, I have my muck rack, which is where writers put stuff, John. I don't know if you know about that.
Yeah, no, muck rack.
Yeah, and then More Than Just Code podcast. I got my Twitter, got my YouTube, I got my whatever. So I have all this stuff in here already. So yeah, my socials, my internet, my Instagram. I got how to log into this thing now. But yeah, so rather than having, I just put this one link on all of my social, and then everything comes to the one place, and people can find me from there. Ooh. Link.bio.
Mm-hmm. Let people know that you've got an OnlyFans. It feels like Linktree, and I haven't heard of Link.bio, but it's basically like Linktree. It feels like it's all of those Instagram people who are like, oh, check out this stuff. It's like, oh, I see you have an OnlyFans. That's an interesting thing that I guess you decided not to put on the Instagram itself. So, like, by far, after, like Twitter and normal stuff, it's like, by far, like, the most heavily used thing I've ever seen.
Be like youtube.com/LarisLovesFeet.
So here's a question from a guy I follow he lives in Vancouver. Who will be the next UK Prime Minister? Ahead of lettuce, Boris Johnson, general election, or yes?
Did you see the Daily Star, the stuff, the lettuce stuff? Oh my God, that's so funny.
No.
They decided to do a countdown. It was only a couple days ago. They decided to do a countdown. They took a fresh lettuce and they dressed it up to look like Liz Truss. And they put a picture of her next to it and said, who will last longer, the head of lettuce or Liz Truss? So their headline, I'll try and find it for you. The picture for tomorrow's newspaper, on the front cover, it says like the lettuce wins. And they've got a picture of this like big smiling head of lettuce because it lasted longer than Liz Truss. Oh, so bad.
Yeah, that's why I had the Twitter link for the trivia. Like, only Prime Minister to not have an episode of Doctor Who air during their premiership since the show began in 1963, according to Morgan Jeffrey.
Yeah, I just pasted a link into the bottom of the show notes. This is unrelated, but show you guys what I'm working on. Trying to drum up some interest in the other podcast I work for with a commercial.
Oh, somebody's got a combine poll going, Jaime?
Oh, sorry, I was listening to the other, the link. It still got like 30 seconds left on Jonathan's link.
Oh, he sent a link? And where'd you put it down?
It's at the bottom of the show notes for this week.
Oh, this is your
my day job.
So I've mentioned that New Amsterdam is my guilty pleasure show that I watch. And coincidentally, this week's episode, one of the many topics that it covers is shortage of nursing. Probably not for the same reason you're going for here in this episode. It was around one nurse who was charged by a sort of overeager prosecuting attorney with murder for what was largely like a medical accident. And so a lot of the nurses are like, so she accidentally gave the wrong drug because she overrode this drug dispensing machine. And so the other nurses are like, the machine won't let me give them the drug. And the doctor's like, well, override it and get the drug. She's dying. He's like, yeah, I'm not going to prison. I'm like, I've got like kids, you know?
Yeah, that's nutty.
Topical. The show likes to amp up the drama.
Yeah, that's right.
Was Avis Fabro on Global TV?
No, CTV. She's CTV. She worked for CTV for a very long, like decades.
Yeah, I remember her. Yeah.
Now she is working with them still on some freelance projects, but she's also working with me as the host of the pod. Which is great.
Cool.
She's super, super engaged and has a lot of great ideas.
Cool.
Yeah, and I put in those other links. The first one that the Daily started a couple days ago, and then the one for tomorrow's paper is killer.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It parallels the House of Dragons too closely, I think.
Yeah. I will laugh out loud hysterically if Boris Johnson ends up back as the prime minister. Well, because there's a lot of people that think that he set Liz Truss up to fail, right? That he basically she was the poison pill where he didn't want Rishi Sunak to be the prime minister. He wanted her because he knew that she was gonna be a disaster, so that he could swoop back in and be like, I got this. But he's a clown too, so I don't know. Again, I think what they need is what America needed post-Trump. Something else. Somebody boring who does their job well.
The way that like 95% of all political action has occurred throughout history with just like spikes of, extreme interest. It should be normally fairly boring, not, oh gosh, I don't think I woke up early enough today. I might have missed some breaking news that was nutty.
Yeah. Like, it's when you wake up in a cold sweat going, oh God, I hope the president didn't tweet.
Yep. I am curious with the Boris Johnson, if he does return, if people are going to do the Thanos meme with his face on it of like, you could not live with your own failure. Where did I bring you? Back to me.
Yeah, it's definitely there for the memes for sure.
I don't like to sign in with Apple because I never can remember when I use it and when I don't use it, you know?
I thought 1Password was doing something about that. I haven't tried it out, but I thought there was a remember which social login you used.
Oh, really?
Option that they had.
Because I just what I do is I put in the title sign in with Apple so I remember how I did it. Right? But they were doing something about it, you think?
I thought they had a feature related to that, but I have not tried it out myself.
Hit edit, see what it does. Yeah, because it's a challenge, like, trying to remember how I logged in, right? Choose new icon. Ooh, change an icon. No, nothing.
The only trick I could think of is to do like a forgot my password check and then see which one it goes to. Like, oh, okay, there you go. That was an Apple one.
Mm-hmm.
Or a Facebook or a Google one. It becomes a little bit more challenging if you have like, let's say like a Gmail that you use to sign up for with Facebook. I think that doesn't really help you in any way. Oh,
I am using my Tim Mitchell one. Huh. I'm way ahead of myself. 27 new amazing free themes. Wow. They got emojis in here now. I can log out. It's all set. Good stuff. What else is new and exciting? No more baseball?
Baseball season's over, man. Didn't you hear?
Yeah.
It's true. It's true.
It's over for everybody here on this show.
Will you continue watching the baseball playoffs, Jaime, once your team's gone?
Not the playoffs. I'll end up picking up in the series, the World Series. Kind of similar to the NBA. I don't generally watch much of the playoffs and tend to watch the finals.
Yeah, I must admit, hockey season started last week, and I was not really very excited about it. I'm not dying to watch it. So I think one heartbreak too many. You're just like, call me in the playoffs. But the NBA started last night. I watched, or the NBA started 2 nights ago, but I watched the Raptors last night and really enjoyed myself and thought, I will watch a bunch of them this year because that they are still at least still living off the glow of winning a championship.
Yeah, other than that, it's just sitting here hoping for rain this weekend because we've had just awful air quality from wildfires. So it'd be nice to flush that out of the air, and if it reaches out to the part of the state where the fires are happening, hopefully help keep the fire from spreading or even contain it.
I didn't realize there was that many going on up there.
Yeah, it's been on for like a while. It feels like, I'm sure it wasn't the air quality alerts continuously, but it emotionally feels like it's been like a month like this. Sitting right now, we're at 164, unhealthy, but is better than yesterday at about this time, according to the Apple weather. We're looking to get rain on, looks like midday Friday, so hopefully that'll start clearing out things. Air quality alert in effect until midnight, so I guess that means maybe the rain's coming soonish. We'll see what happens there. But it'll be good because it's been playing havoc with like my what do you call it, like allergies or something. Getting headaches and other things that are just not good, not healthy to be breathing in that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we get that around here just because of the expanse of humanity in this particular region is pretty huge, so we get poor air quality for a long stretch in the summertime sometimes.
All right, how many?
Next week, 2 Star Treks, a Star Wars, and a House of the Dragon.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Talk to you soon, guys.
Next time.
Catch you later. Where's the off button?
Bye.